All right, Mr. Ahmed here for 9.4. Goal for today is going to be still solving quadratics, and we are going to do it by a process called completing the square. And in order for us to complete the square, what we're going to do is we're going to create a perfect square trinomial, and then we will factor it, and we'll be able to take the square root. All right, so we are going to create that perfect square trinomial. So our warm-up here, just a brief little review. If we think back to our perfect square trinomials, we were looking at the first term being a perfect square, the square root of x squared is x, and the last term, the square root of 9 is 3. And when I multiply those two together, 3 times x, and double it, times 2, I would end up with the middle term of 6x. So you could also think of it as factors of the last term that add up to the middle term. Factors of 9 that add up to 6 are 3 and 3. And I could rewrite it as x plus 3 times x plus 3, which is x plus 3 squared. And in a similar manner, I'll take a quick look at this next one here, and I notice that the square root of 64 is 8 and the square root of x squared is x. The middle term is negative, so it's going to have to be a negative 8 when I take the square root, and I could rewrite it as the factored form of x minus 8 squared. So those were our perfect square trinomials. So for us to create a perfect square trinomial, we are going to find the c value that makes it a perfect square trinomial. In order to do that, we're going to take half of b, which is the coefficient of x. Okay, half of b, and then we are going to square it. That'll make it a perfect square trinomial. So for us to create these perfect square trinomials, we are going to take a look here, add an x onto this 12. We'll call that a 12x, and we are going to find the value of c that will make it a perfect square trinomial. So for us to do that, we're going to take b, which is 12. We're going to take 12 divided by 2 and then square it. Okay, 12 divided by 2, 6. 6 squared is 36. So I will add 36 on to make it our new c value. So I'd have x squared plus 12x plus 36. And I've added my perfect square. The square root of 36 is 6. If I double 6, I end up with 12. So that's our perfect square trinomial. So I could rewrite it in factored form as x plus 6 squared. And we'll try one more here. We are going to take the middle term, negative 8, over 2, and square it. It's going to end up being a positive number every time. Okay, negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. But when I square negative 4, I end up with a positive 16. So I would have to add a 16 on. X squared minus 8x plus 16. There's my perfect square trinomial. Square root of 16 is 4. Square root of x squared is x. 4x doubled is going to be negative 8. So I'd have an x minus 4 squared. Okay, so that's how we are going to create these perfect square trinomials. So what we are going to do is we're going to rewrite the equation like this. We are going to write it as ax squared plus bx plus blank equals something. Okay, so we're going to put this blank in here because that's where we're going to complete the square. In the boxes, or the underlined spot, we can make that a box. That's fine. We're going to add it to both sides because if I add it to one side, I'm going to have to add it to the other side. We're going to find the correct c value to complete the square. Then we'll factor the left side. After we factor the left side, we can take the square roots. Don't forget the plus and the minus. And then we can solve for x. It'll be just like the previous day. So, first example. In order for us to write that in that manner, we have to move the c value over to the other side. So I have to subtract 24 from both sides. When I do that, I would have x squared minus 10x plus blank. That's where we're going to complete the square. Equals a negative 24 plus blank. Because if I add this to one side, I still have to add it to the other side of the equation to make it true. So now we can complete the square. We are going to take our b value, which is negative 10, divide it by 2, and square it. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. Negative 5 squared is 25. So I have to add 25 to both sides. So when I add my 25 to both sides, I create my perfect square trinomial on the left, and I have a value over here on the right. I can then factor this side. Square root of 25 is 5, so it'd be x minus, the middle term's negative, 5 squared equals negative 24 plus 25 is 1. Now I can take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus and minus. So I would have x minus 5, that cancels the squared, equals plus or minus 1. Now I solve both solutions. Add 5 to both sides, and we would have x to equal 5 plus or minus 1. So we do 5 plus 1, x equals 6. 5 minus 1, x equals 4. We found our two solutions. Okay? But we still have to find both. Next one. Add an x onto this too. Forgot another x. It's a 2x. Okay? I have to add the 48 to both sides, so I would have x squared minus 2x plus our box. That's where we're going to complete the square. We added 48 to both sides, so it's equal to 48 plus blank. Now we can complete the square. Negative 2 divided by 2 squared is equal to a 1. So we add 1 to both sides. Simplifying, factor this side. X minus 1 squared, the square root of 1 is 1, equals 49. Now we can take the square root. Don't forget the plus and minus. So I would have x minus 1 equals plus or minus 7. The square root of 49 is 7. Now we add our 1 to both sides to finish solving. And x is equal to 1 plus or minus 7. Do it both ways. 1 plus 7 is 8. 1 minus 7 is negative 6. And there is our two solutions. All right, for example 3, this one's a little bit different here. I noticed that my leading coefficient is 3, so I'm still going to follow the same procedure. I'm going to bring 27 over first. So I will subtract 27 from both sides. And when I rewrite, I would have 3x squared minus 24x equals negative 27. Now, I've decided not to put my box in quite yet because I can manipulate this equation a little bit. Because 3 is a common factor of all three terms, I can divide both sides by 3. That'll turn our leading coefficient into just an x squared. So then I would have x squared minus 8x equals negative 9. Now we can start the process of completing the square. So I'll rewrite it with my box now. So I would have x squared minus 8x plus blank equals negative 9 plus blank. All right. We're going to take negative 8, just like we have been, and divide it by 2, and then square it. That is equal to 16. So I have to add 16 to both sides. All right. Now we can factor this side. Okay. So when I factor this side, I would have an x minus 4 squared equals 16 plus negative 9, which is 7. Okay. Now I have a 7 over there. So that one's not going to be a perfect square when I take the square root of it. All right, take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus and the minus. So I would have x minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 7. I cannot simplify that radical, so I'm going to leave it in exact form by adding 4, and x will equal 4 plus or minus the square root of 7. And that is our final answer. We'll leave it there. If you needed a decimal, you could type that into a calculator. Honestly, this one's pretty tough. You might see one of that difficulty level, and that would be it. Go ahead and hit pause and give the U-try a shot. All right, hopefully you had some success. First step, move the 8, subtract 8 from both sides. X squared plus 12x plus blank equals negative 8 plus blank. Now we complete the square. Take 12 over 2 and square it. That's equal to 36, so I add 36 to both sides. Okay, factor this side. Square root of 36 is 6, so I have x plus 6 squared equals negative 8 plus 36, which is 28. Okay, we are going to have to simplify that square root this time. Take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus or minus, and that's going to have a perfect square factor. So I have x plus 6 equals the square root of 28. The perfect square factors that go into that are plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. 4 times 7 is 28. I can then simplify that down to plus or minus 2 times the square root of 7. And we still have our x plus 6 on the other side. Now I subtract my 6, subtract my 6. X is equal to negative 6 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 7. That is the exact form. If you needed to find the decimal approximation, we just have to type that into our calculators both ways with the plus and the minus. So that's it for completing the square. Have a good rest of the day.